Hi, I'm Tom Paper, and welcome to the Digital Gallery's exhibit on the American South in the 19th century. This exhibit was created as a supplement to a class hosted on October 21st, 2020 by my friend Jan van Eck. The presentation was led by Stephen Mintz of the University of Texas at Austin. My main takeaways from the class were that, number one, the Southern economy was focused around cotton, that cotton was highly labor intensive and dependent on slavery, and that the main customer of US cotton was Britain. So the South remained like a colony even after independence. The economy of the North, by contrast, was more independent, industrial, and self-sufficient. Slavery grew rapidly between 1790 and 1860. I put together some statistics on slavery and cotton in the US during this period, and I was struck by the growth of slavery, which was roughly the same. You can see here 2.7 and 2.5% growth as the growth of the overall population, 3%, but also by the astronomical growth of cotton production. It's also important to note that in 1807, the US passed a law banning the import of slaves from other countries. While this sounds good, it really didn't slow the growth of slavery because the South already had 1 million slaves. Here you can see 1.2 in 1810. And over the next 50 years, 3 million more slaves would be born and become a part of the slave economy in the United States. Now, one of my questions was why or how did slavery grow so much over the first 70 years in our country's history? And the answer is not simple, but there are several reasons. So first, slavery had the support of the banks. Slaves were actually financed with bonds on slaves. The land in the South was suitable and available for cotton production. Technological innovations in cotton production, the cotton gin, Eli Whitney, made the US cotton very price competitive. Fourth, there was consumer demand for cotton, especially in Britain. And finally, there was a mindset of plantation owners that was ready to grow slavery. One amazing and depressing fact that I learned about through this class was that at the height of slavery, the combined value of US slaves was greater than the value of all the railroads and all the factories in the United States. You can get that from the 1619 podcast by the New York Times. So the maps that left the greatest impression on me were the following. The first map is by Malachy Postlethwaite of West Africa in 1755. It highlights the competition between the various European nations, Portugal, Spain, the Dutch, France, England, over their interests in slaves, ivory, gold, gum, and grain in West Africa. So there was a whole marketplace feeding the American demand for slaves. And you can see the flags of the competing countries on the west coast of Africa here highlighted. This map was intended to grow support for the British investment in all these trades. The second map that's fascinating to me is this one from 1856 by Reynolds, made after the repeal of the Missouri Compromise, which meant that slavery was now open to all of the US territories. And this petrified the forces against slavery in the country. It was intended to show data about the free states. That's on the left side here is the free states. And the free states on the left, the slave states on the right. And in order to show how the slave states were actually inferior or less developed than the free states, I was particularly struck, and I put a dot down here, by this comparison. So these are all the slave states, and they went to lengths here to show the number of public libraries, only 700 in all of the slave states and 15,000 in the northern states, 20 times more. The next map that really struck me is this one from 1861. It's Lincoln's slave map showing the percentage of slaves in each county in the South. It's well known that Lincoln carefully studied this map both before and during the Civil War. And what's also amazing is if you look at a map from 2010, the African American population in our country has not markedly changed since the Civil War. So that's it. My thanks to the David Rumsey Center at Stanford, to the Library of Congress, Wikipedia, the University of Texas at Austin, and Susan Schulten, who wrote a wonderful book called American 100 Maps, for the maps that are in this exhibit. Also like to thank Stephen Mintz and Jan Van Eck for hosting the class, and thank you for visiting the Digital Gallery.